You think that old fool actually believes your sham? The words sliced through me like shards of glass as I fumbled with the hotel voicemail system. Ethan is a meal ticket, and I plan to milk him for everything he's worth. My heart pounded as the saccharine voice of Clarissa, my son Ethan's fiancée, filled my ears. I gripped the phone tighter, nausea rising. You should have seen the look on his mother's face when I faked that little spa weekend. She's growing suspicious, but I can handle that bitter crone. A mirthless laugh crackled through the line. I'll keep playing housewife until I bleed the trust fund dry, then ditch the loser. The message ended with a victorious cackle that plunged me into ice-cold realization. My own future daughter-in-law was a master manipulator, targeting my beloved son's inheritance. A maelstrom of anger and protectiveness surged within me. I had to act. But how? One misstep could push Ethan right into her venomous clutches. That evening, I feigned cheerfulness at the family dinner. Ethan beamed as he showed off the obscenely large diamond ring he had proposed with. My stomach churned, watching Clarissa smirk and trace the rock possessively. Eleanor, you must be so thrilled to have me joining the family, Clarissa cooed with sickening sweetness. We can finally spend more quality time together. I choked back the urge to scream the truth at her. Of course, dear, I can't wait to get to know my new daughter better. Ethan squeezed her hand, oblivious to the lie I had just spoken. In that instant, I vowed to peel back her facade and expose this vile parasite before she destroyed my son. After they left, I slumped onto the sofa, my mind racing. How could I make Ethan see Clarissa's true colors without pushing him away completely? There had to be a way to gather undeniable proof of her treachery. I thought of my recently departed husband, Walt, and the decades of unconditional love he had shown me. I owed it to his memory to protect our son from this viper. The first step was documenting her every move, building an airtight case that even Ethan couldn't deny. Tomorrow, I would call my friend Joan for help. She had street smarts I sorely lacked. For tonight, I would savor the strength of my love for Ethan and the solace of knowing I would do whatever it took to save him. The next morning, I phoned Joan over breakfast. I need your help exposing that snake Clarissa for what she truly is. Joan's raspy chuckle crackled through the line. Took you long enough to wake up and smell the backstabbing. I never trusted that little viper. Relief washed over me, knowing I had an ally. She's after Ethan's money, admitted it herself on a voicemail meant for an accomplice. We need to catch her red-handed. Say no more, Elle. I'm already firing up the web crawlers to dig into her virtual footprints. For the next few weeks, Joan and I operated like seasoned private investigators. We scoured Clarissa's social media, unearthing an avid interest in expensive indulgences, designer handbags, luxury cars, and palatial homes she could never afford on her modest salary. Scouring her profile, I stumbled across veiled insults about Ethan's frugal nature. Ugh, my boyfriend is such a tightwad miser. Hubby better not be as cheap if he wants a trophy wife. My blood boiled at her toxic entitlement. Meanwhile, I covertly trailed Clarissa, cataloging her weekly stays at overpriced spa retreats and meetings with a shady, well-dressed man at upscale restaurants. Whatever swindle she was running, it required deep pockets. One afternoon, I caught them in a heated quarrel outside an Italian bistro. You promised me the world, and all I get are these measly allowances, Clarissa hissed. I'm not some cheap fling you can just discard when you're bored. The man sneered. Don't get greedy now. You agreed to the terms when you signed up for my mentorship program. My phone camera clicked rapidly, capturing every unfolding second until they stormed off in separate directions. That evening, Joan decoded the website for his mentorship program, a sophisticated racket that paired wealthy sugar daddies with attractive young women for legal exploitation. Listen to this gem, Joan read from one of the client testimonials. Jenny is the perfect protégée, gorgeous, gleaming with potential, and willing to learn all the tricks to secure her future allowance. Sounds like this creep was grooming girls like your future daughter-in-law. My heart sank, realizing the depth of Clarissa's deception. She never truly loved Ethan. He was merely the next sucker to drain dry. Clutching the damning photos, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. We've got to make my son see this witch's fangs before it's too late. With the hard evidence mounting, it was time to make my next move, planting seeds of doubt in Ethan's mind about his precious Clarissa. I had to tread carefully. One false step could push him away permanently. Over the following weeks, I brought up stories ripped from the headlines whenever Ethan visited. Scorned lovers fleeced by conniving paramours, tales of greed and betrayal from those closest. I gauged his reactions, watching for any flickers of suspicion. "Did you hear about the Johnson divorce?" I asked one Sunday as we sipped coffee. Turns out his wife secretly racked up millions in debt with her lover, nearly bankrupted the poor man. Ethan rolled his eyes. "Come on, Mom. Not every relationship ends in duplicity." "I'm just saying, you can never really know someone's true intentions until it's too late." I gave him a loaded look before changing the subject. Another time, we caught a news segment about an Instagram influencer who conned her followers into a shady pyramid scheme for personal profit. "See, that's why you should be careful who you trust implicitly with your heart and wallet," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Ethan just laughed it off. "You worry too much, Mom. Clarissa may enjoy the finer things, but her love for me is pure." His unwavering defensiveness of that witch made my blood boil. How could he be so blind? During one of Clarissa's weekly girls' spa trips, I decided to get more brazen. I slipped a magazine feature about romance scammers onto the coffee table before Ethan arrived. "Have you seen this, son?" I asked pointedly when he picked it up. "You'd be amazed at the levels some people stoop to ensnare their interests." His jaw clenched as he flipped through the pages. "Is this your way of insinuating something about Clarissa?" I patted his arm. "Of course not, dear. I just want to make sure you're being smart about who you fully trust with your life." Ethan shook his head vehemently. "Clarissa may enjoy pampering herself, but she's not some gold-digging snake." He stormed off, once again deflecting my attempts to open his eyes. With the wedding date looming, time was running out for me to make him see reason. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed with an alert. Clarissa had purchased a $25,000 Birkin bag, just another drop in her endless spending well. Gritting my teeth, I forwarded the notification to Ethan. "Is this where your money is going? Tell me again how she's not using you." I awaited his response with bated breath, my heart pounding. This time, he had to see the truth staring him in the face. After an agonizing hour, his reply lit up my screen. "You're way out of line, Mom. Stay out of my business before you ruin everything." Anguished tears blurred my vision. He was already lost in her siren spell, lured by her false affection. That ungrateful succubus had turned my own son against me. But I wouldn't give up, not while there was still a chance to break her grip on him. If sweet reason failed, perhaps seeing her true nature with my own eyes would be the only way to make Ethan's rose-colored glasses fall away. A few weeks later, we gathered for Ethan's birthday dinner at my place. Joan pulled me aside before the guests arrived. "You might want to brace yourself, Elle," she said grimly. "I caught Clarissa upgrading her alibi for those weekly spa trips." She handed me a printed email where Clarissa detailed her treatments in lurid detail to an unknown recipient. My cheeks flushed reading the explicitly erotic descriptions. "Seems our little Becky homewrecker is selling more than just her companionship to make ends meet," Joan said. "Her sleazeball mentor is probably pimping her out to his wealthy pals." My vision stained red with fury, but I had no time to process this sickening revelation. The doorbell rang. The guests were arriving. Putting on my best hostess smile, I welcomed Ethan and Clarissa inside. She airily pecked my cheek, her sickly sweet perfume overwhelming my senses. "Why, thank you for hosting, Eleanor." She squeezed my hands tightly. "Ethan and I just can't get enough family time before the big day." The undisguised gloating in her voice made me want to vomit. I caught Joan glaring daggers at Clarissa from across the room. As dinner commenced, Clarissa draped herself all over Ethan, caressing his arm and whispering in his ear. He beamed like an enraptured fool, oblivious to her repulsive acting. Swallowing hard, I raised my glass in a toast. To family, who we can always count on through life's ups and downs. I fixed Clarissa with a pointed stare. The ones who truly love us would never knowingly betray that trust. She met my gaze steadily, a sly smirk curling her lips as she swirled her wine. The defiant look in her eyes dared me to expose her secret. After the meal, I sought refuge in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter to steady my ragged breaths. How could I possibly convince Ethan when she had him utterly enthralled by her succubus spell? The sound of shattering glass made me jolt upright. I rushed into the living room to find Clarissa on the floor, clutching her face. My goodness, I got a bit dizzy there, she wailed dramatically as Ethan cradled her. I must have tripped over these rug tassels. Oh, my ankle is throbbing. Nudging past them with my cane, I bent to examine the plush rug. There were no errant tassels to be seen, just rippled fabric. It was as I feared. She had staged this accident to play the victim. Oh dear, these hardwood floors get so slippery. Let me call you an ambulance right away. I made a show of reaching for my phone. Clarissa clutched my arm with surprising strength, her nails biting into my skin. That's so sweet of you, but no need. I'd simply hate to disrupt the whole evening over a silly fall. Ethan shot me a warning look as he helped Clarissa to her feet. But not before I saw the cold triumph flash in her eyes. This was just the opening salvo of her manipulation. As our guests trickled out, Joan pulled me aside, her face grave. This has gone far enough, Elle. That snake shattered your antique vase and faked the whole damn spill, right in front of our eyes. Until now, I'd been determined to handle this delicately, so as not to alienate Ethan. But after tonight's unrepentant display, I realized this venomous interloper would stop at nothing to sink her fangs into our family. You're right, I said grimly. Playtime is over. It's time to fight fire with fire and take this diabolical beast down for good. Resolved, I began plotting my counterattack, bolstered by the injustice I had witnessed firsthand. One way or another, I would cut Clarissa's poisonous influence out of our lives, even if it meant losing Ethan's trust temporarily. Some risks were worth taking to save my son from the cunning succubus he had invited into our world. The next morning, I was poring over the intel Joan and I had gathered when my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Eleanor Wilkins? A gruff male voice crackled. This is Damon. Damon Caldwell. We need to talk about Clarissa. My pulse quickened as I recognized the name from our investigation. He was the smarmy matchmaker pulling Clarissa's strings. I know all about your little scheme to bilk my son, I spat. I have more than enough evidence of your twisted tactics to bury you both in legal hell. Damon exhaled heavily. Look, you've got it all wrong, lady. I want to take Clarissa down as much as you do. Maybe more. I scoffed loudly. Yes, I'm sure your sudden crisis of conscience has nothing to do with the money trail we've uncovered. You reek of desperation. Call it what you want, he retorted. Fact is, your future daughter-in-law played me for a fool, too. Made a nice buck stringing me along for months before moving on to her next mark. Despite my mistrust, curiosity gnawed at me. So you're suggesting an alliance against her? What's in it for a bottom feeder like yourself? A chance to settle the score and regain a shred of self-respect, he replied gruffly. You're not the only one she tried to ruin. I've got the receipts to prove the full extent of her hustle. I chewed my lip, considering his proposal. As much as it turned my stomach to partner with this odious snake, he clearly had intel I lacked on Clarissa's previous scandals. If his evidence could finally break Ethan's infatuation, it was a risk worth taking. All right, you slippery snake, I acquiesced. I'll play ball for now, but so help me, if you try any underhanded double crosses, I'll ensure you rot in prison beside your little protege. We made arrangements to connect later that afternoon. When Damon arrived, I was struck by his surprisingly dignified manner. The facade of his suave online persona had completely dissolved, leaving an unexpectedly haggard and guilt-ridden man in its wake. I'll cut right to the chase, he said gruffly, pulling out a musty transcript. This is the original recorded Skype session where Clarissa seduced me into her game. He queued up the shaky audio file, and her saccharine voice immediately grated my nerves. You understand the terms, don't you? Her tone dripped with feigned innocence. I offer you my companionship and affection, and you treat me like the refined princess I am. Nice dinners, penthouse suites, a taste of the high life. Of course, my dear, Damon's recorded self replied. I'll want for nothing with a dream girl on my arm. My skin crawled hearing the unvarnished hunger in his voice. No matter how repulsive, his feelings appeared to have been genuine, till Clarissa defrauded him. Once I've secured a better long-term situation, our transaction will be complete, Clarissa stated coolly. No muss, no fuss. You get the privilege of my company for a few blissful months." So that was her play all along, Damon ground out. Love bomb her targets until she found a richer sap to latch onto permanently. One by one, he unveiled a damning trail of evidence, testimony from other bilked benefactors, video stings exposing her grifts, bank statements detailing the thousands she'd siphoned. A slam-dunk case of fraud and extortion, if we could make it stick. "There's more where that came from," he said grimly. "Enough to bury that succubus for years if you help me catch her in the act." My pulse raced. This was the break I'd been desperately seeking to finally shatter Clarissa's diabolical spell over Ethan. A righteous fury blazed within me at the sheer scale of her deceptions. "You've got yourself a partner," I said, extending my hand. "Let's take down this she-devil once and for all." Damon's calloused grip was heavy but firm, a curiously reassuring sign of the redemptive path ahead for this unlikely ally. For the first time, I felt the winds of justice turning in our favor. Squaring my shoulders, I began plodding alongside Damon to orchestrate the most brutal and public downfall for my son's pernicious tormentor. This time, even Ethan couldn't ignore the avalanche of proof we were about to unleash. Clarissa's reign of terror was nearing its inevitable cataclysmic conclusion, and I would savor every single well-deserved second. The big day finally arrived, Ethan and Clarissa's engagement party at the ritzy Berkshire Country Club. Joan and I made our entrance, scanning the opulently decorated ballroom with grim determination. "Remember, we exposed that demon at the first chance," Joan muttered under her breath. "I'll cue up the video sting on my tablet." I gave a terse nod, smoothing my hands over my silk dress. Out of the corner of my eye I spotted Damon lurking by the bar, downing a tumbler of scotch. He gave me the slightest nod before melting back into the crowd. Heavy chandeliers glittered above us as partygoers clinked champagne flutes in celebration. I fought the urge to gag seeing Clarissa draped possessively over Ethan, her harsh makeup and skin-tight dress leaving nothing to the imagination. The boorish host kicked off the interminable round of sycophantic toasts by clearing his throat loudly. "What a most auspicious pairing we celebrate tonight, our esteemed young master Ethan and his ravishing bride-to-be." A smattering of titters and applause filled the room. Ethan beamed with fatuous pride as Clarissa smirked, caressing his cheek like a prize pet. "We've all borne witness to this love story blossoming over the past year," the host simpered. "Why, I remember the first charity gala our happy couple attended." That was our signal. Joan and I shared a grim look before rising in unison. "Save your breath, you insufferable windbag," I barked, slicing through the fawning noise. "We all know this is a complete sham of a union." Stunned gasps echoed off the vaulted ceilings as all eyes turned toward us. Ethan gaped at me in horror while Clarissa slowly narrowed her gaze into a murderous glare. Undeterred, I pressed onwards. "For months, I've watched this devious viper ensnare my son through lies and manipulation, using his trusting nature as a mere pit stop to drain his inheritance before discarding him entirely." Damon emerged from the crowd, his chiseled face etched in remorse. "It's all true, folks. True, folks. I was an accomplice in setting Ethan up as the next sucker in Clarissa's long grift." "You bass," Clarissa snarled before I cut her off with a raised hand. "We have receipts, darling, footage, evidence, alibis, the whole sordid tale of your con laid bare." I gestured to Joan, who queued up the video on her tablet, as Damon passed around the stacks of paperwork detailing her exploits. There on the screen, clear as day, was Clarissa describing her scheme to seduce and fleece Ethan to Damon in lurid detail. The room collectively recoiled as her own recorded voice sliced through the stunned silence like a dagger. "Once I've secured Ethan as my personal wallet for all eternity, you and I will be through," she purred contemptuously. "I'll finally be set for life without any of you leeches dragging me down." The screen flashed to images of her shopping splurges, explicit chat logs detailing her escorts, and ledgers tracking the thousands she'd embezzled from her previous beaux. The deluge of evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. I watched in grim satisfaction as the color drained from Ethan's face, while Clarissa shrunk back in horror. His adoring facade crumbled as the mirror finally shattered, showing her for the soulless harpy she truly was. You vile snake!" he bellowed, pulling away from her grasp as if burned. "All this time, everything was just an act to drain me dry." Clarissa opened her mouth, but no words emerged. For once, her forked tongue had been utterly severed. In that moment of reckoning, the full force of her treachery hung overhead like a guillotine blade. She was well and truly lanced, her reign of terror over. A chorus of enraged shouts filled the room as the crowd turned on Clarissa in a frenzy of scorn. Damon and I exchanged a look of righteous victory, objective achieved. Fueled by shock and embarrassment, Clarissa attempted to flee, but Damon's hired security blocked all exits, their stony faces etched in disgust at the charlatan exposed in their midst. As the police arrived to apprehend her, I sidled up to Ethan and slipped my arm around his shoulders. For the first time in months, he accepted my embrace without protest, his body shuddering with remorseful sobs. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered brokenly. "You tried to warn me, but I was too blind and stubborn to listen." I stroked his hair, at last feeling the weight of maternal anguish lift from my soul. "It's all right, son," I murmured. "We got her in the end. That's what matters. She can never hurt you again." Reveling in our hard-won victory, a sense of tranquility washed over me. The nightmare was finally over. Now the true healing could begin. As the police led Clarissa away in handcuffs, she whipped her head back, a mask of unbridled fury etched across her beautiful features. "You arrogant fools think you've won?" she spat venomously. "I'll bury every single one of you for this humiliation." Damon strode forward, unflinching. "Can it, Princess? The jig is up. We have all the proof of your cons right here." He tapped the thick dossier tucked under his arm. Clarissa's bravado faltered momentarily before her lips curled in a sardonic sneer. "Oh, I sincerely doubt that. Your little paper trail is circumstantial at best. I'll have the best lawyers money can buy tear it to shreds." A muscle twitched in Damon's jaw. "Maybe you're forgetting the part where we have your original confession on video, laying out your entire scheme." He pulled out his phone and thumbed the screen. Clarissa's syrupy voice dripped from the speakers. "Once I've secured Ethan as my forever cash cow, I'll leave you all in the dust without a second thought." She visibly recoiled, fury simmering behind her eyes. "That's inadmissible. It was obtained illegally through entrapment." "Actually, quite legal," Damon countered smoothly. "See, all parties involved in that recording consented to its terms. Including you, dearie." With a tap, a new video clip began playing, Clarissa signing off on the lengthy terms and conditions for his mentorship program. A brutal clamp of legalese bound her to any evidence gathered by participants like Damon as the agency's proxy. No, Clarissa's voice was little more than a mortified whisper as the truth sank in. For the first time I glimpsed the naked terror flickering in her eyes. The arrogant sociopath who had brought so much pain crumbled before our very eyes into a sniveling wreck of a girl, pretty veneer fully stripped away. "You can't do this," she wailed, struggling against the cuffs. "I'll have you all thrown in jail for this entrapment scheme." "Save it, Princess." Damon sneered, utterly devoid of sympathy, as she lashed out in desperation. "Your signature is on every damn release form as you joined my program of your own free will. No jury will buy your lousy excuse for stealing thousands from dozens of men." The blood drained from Clarissa's face as she swiveled toward Ethan in a final, pathetic bid for mercy. "Ethy, baby, please. This is all one huge misunderstanding. You have to believe me. I only wanted us to have everything we ever dreamed of." Ethan regarded her outstretched hand with a look of revulsion before turning away, sickened by the mere sight of her overtures after witnessing her true colors. Joan sauntered over to the police escorts, her face split in a leering grin. "Don't forget to confiscate her phone, officers. I'm sure a quick scroll will reveal some unsavory content she's been selling on the side." Clarissa unleashed a feral howl of outrage at this final indignity as the officers wrenched her mobile device from her bejeweled clutch. All remaining composure melted away as the reality of her situation crystallized. She was ruined. As they hauled her towards the exit, she thrashed and spat curses with unhinged fury. "This isn't over, you psychotic old bat. You'll regret crossing me when I get out. I'll destroy all of you." The ballroom doors slammed shut on her wretched screeches, smothering her burning vitriol like a doused flame. An eerie hush blanketed the room in the wake of her cataclysmic unraveling. Grasping Ethan's arm, I guided him to a nearby sofa, my heart breaking at the devastated look marring his handsome features. He stared unblinkingly ahead in a daze, emotionally shell-shocked now that the venom had drained from his veins. "It's over, son," I spoke softly, squeezing his limp hand. "That nightmare ordeal with Clarissa is finally behind us." Ethan remained frozen, his mind clearly still processing the seismic shift in his worldview. After several moments, he turned to me, anguish swimming in his eyes. "How could I have been so blind, Mom? Putting you through all that torment because I was too stubborn and love-struck to recognize a viper when I saw one." I pulled him close, his strong frame heaving with dry sobs against my shoulders. For several long minutes, the only sounds were his muffled cries as he finally released the torrent of pain and guilt. When he resurfaced, his gaze was solemn, but clear of the fog Clarissa's manipulations had cast. A profound shift had occurred. My son was reborn from the wreckage of this ordeal as a wiser, more hardened man. "Thank you," he murmured gruffly into my hair, imbuing those two simple words with the weight of a world's regret. "For never giving up on me, even when I deserved it the least." A profound sense of peace enveloped me like a soothing balm. At long last, my beloved boy had awoken from his nightmare before it consumed him completely. There would still be much healing ahead, but we were finally free to begin anew. As Joan and Damon approached with warm embraces, I felt a resurgence of hope for the path ahead. Our family may have been bruised, but never broken, emerging from the fire tempered into an unshakable unit. One way or another, we would overcome this trauma to craft new dreams again. And this time, well armed to safeguard our joy from the likes of Clarissa or ilk forevermore. In the aftermath of Clarissa's spectacular downfall, an uneasy quiet settled over our family. For weeks, Ethan retreated inwards, grappling with the devastating betrayal and public humiliation that Snake put him through. I busied myself with community outreach, sharing our cautionary tale about Clarissa's manipulation tactics at local libraries and domestic violence shelters. The further I ventured into this advocacy work, the more survivors' stories I encountered, a sobering realization of how pervasive this insidious evil had become. "We can't let cases like mine fester in the shadows," I proclaimed firmly at one packed community meeting. "By shining a light on these snakes' underhanded tactics, we starve them of their hunting grounds." My words struck a resonant chord, inspiring other victims to shed their shame and speak out. Before long, a local support group blossomed from the ashes of our family's turmoil, united in our shared pursuit of justice and healing. In the meantime, Ethan bore the brunt of Clarissa's avalanche of legal retaliation with stoic reserve. Her high-powered attorneys flooded the courts with nuisance suits and outlandish defamation claims that were inevitably dismissed, one by one. "They're just grasping at straws to bleed us dry," Damon grumbled over steaming cups of coffee in my kitchen. "But the waterproof evidence trail leaves them no escape route." After months of her desperate delaying tactics, Clarissa was finally remanded to state custody ahead of her criminal trial. The news of her precipitous fall from grace was breathlessly devoured across the nation's tabloid rags. Once the media frenzy subsided, the legal process unfolded like clockwork. Damon's airtight documentation, combined with the recorded confessions and witness testimony, overwhelmingly demolished any notion of Clarissa's innocence. She was swiftly convicted of fraud, extortion, and a slew of other unsavory offenses. As she was led away in chains to begin her lengthy sentence, Clarissa wheeled on me one final time, her eyes glinting with pure malice. "I hope you're proud of yourself, you bitter crone," she snarled through a rictus sneer. "I was just getting warmed up before you stuck your wrinkled nose where it didn't belong." Unflinching, I stared her down with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Is that what you tell yourself at night to justify your bottomless depravity, that you were destined for bigger and better deceptions?" "I'll make sure you pay for this," she hissed venomously. "One way or another, you'll regret the day you crossed my path." I shook my head slowly, the briefest flicker of sadness passing over me as they dragged her away. "I feel sorry for whatever void exists inside you that compels such monstrous cruelty, but I won't lose another wink of sleep over you." Her guttural screams of wordless rage echoed down the corridor until the heavy doors sealed shut behind her, silencing that vile tongue once and for all. In the months that followed, Ethan gradually emerged from his cocoon of guilt and shame, bolstered by the unwavering support network Joan and I built around him. I reveled in his small victories. A brighter spark returning to his gaze, a fuller belly laugh at the dinner table. One evening, over brandies, he broached the subject of romance again, almost shyly. "Have you met Gina yet? We've been seeing each other for a few months now." Gina was a warm, grounded young woman who had been Ethan's devoted confidant throughout his darkest days. Under her compassionate care, I watched my son's tarnished heart slowly begin beating again. "She stuck by me through this whole hideous ordeal," he murmured, never judging, only lifting me up when Clarissa's venom dragged me down. A small, tender smile played across his lips as he swirled the amber liquid. "I know it's still too soon to even think about rings or anything like that, but for the first time in forever, I feel like the future could hold some genuine light again." My own vision blurred with tears of joy, seeing him gradually released from Clarissa's toxic undertow. Despite our family's shared trauma, there was still hope beckoning just over the horizon. Reaching across the table, I clasped Ethan's hand in mine. "My darling boy, all I've ever wanted is for you to find someone who truly cherishes you for who you are, flaws, baggage, and all." In that simple moment of connection, unencumbered by scheming parasites or poisoned agendas, a profound sense of peace enveloped my soul like a warm embrace. Our family had journeyed through the very depths of treachery and despair, but emerged into the light again, scarred yet unbreakable. No matter what storms still loomed on the horizon, I knew we would weather them together, leading one another home to calmer waters. Our bonds of blood and hardship had been tested by fire, emerging inviolable and everlasting. And I silently thanked the heavens for conspiring to drive the last of Clarissa's toxic venom from our lives forever, finally restoring the family's sacred heart from the brink of oblivion.